Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
While no deal is still a possibility, all sorts of businesses have been forced to plan ahead, as we've been reporting this week. Better to be safe than sorry, and certainly that's true for the pharmaceutical industry and for those who use and need their drugs and medicines. For the companies, their profits depend on it. For patients, their health, even their lives depend on it.
Boxes and boxes of medicine. Not unusual for a pharmaceutical company, but Wockhart's main warehouse in Wrexham now has double the number of drugs than normal. It's stockpiling in case we leave the EU with no deal, contingency planning of the highest order.
Up to 4 months we are quite well covered, and beyond that we have got more stocks coming from all other countries.
Managing Director Surjuan Singh says it's a prudent but essential measure.
If there is going to be any kind of a shortage is going to be there, then we should be well equipped and prepared for supplying the patients, because many of the products which we supply go to secondary care, which is in the hospitals.
This warehouse usually operates at around 85% capacity. At the moment it's at 95%, and another warehouse has been opened to help hold all the stock. The extra drugs, including antibiotics, anti-diabetic drugs and bovine insulin, have cost this company an extra £10 million. But the boss here says it makes business sense and could be vital for patients.
The fear is any blockages at the border could delay the supply of drugs coming from the EU. Almost all medication is tariff-free throughout the world, but prices could increase if they have to be batch tested again in the UK. That would also cause further delays to patients. Georgina Tankard is about to have radiotherapy for her breast cancer. She'll need a hormone drug afterwards and wants reassurance she'll get it.
We're not at war. We are not a country that doesn't have access to these drugs. So why are we putting people in that situation? People don't choose to be ill. People don't choose to have cancer. To putting them in a situation where potentially they're not going to have access to scans, to the treatment and to the drugs that they will need is just totally unacceptable.
Consultant oncologist Dr. Clive Pedell agrees. He says if radioactive cancer drugs that degrade quickly are delayed in transit, it could be the difference between life and death for a patient.
There's clearly going to be serious risks to life. Some of the pharmaceutical agents are used to measure kidney function before we deliver chemotherapy drugs. And unless we can be certain of the accuracy of our kidney function tests, we can't then give the appropriate dose of chemotherapy.
The government, though, insists everything that can be done to prepare is being done.
The supply of medicines is critical. This is why we're doing this planning. You know, we make sure that for the short shelf life drugs that can't be stockpiled, we'll be bringing them in by aeroplane, and that we make sure that there's the supply available.
Despite government reassurances, some in the medical community insist they are not scaremongering. And with predictions a no-deal Brexit could cost the NHS more than £2 billion by next year, it's clearly a scenario many fear most. Emily Morgan, News at 10 in Wrexham.
One day in the future, there will be a Brexit board game with trapdoors, turncoats, bluffers, double bluffers, experts in the dark arts, decoys and honest brokers. But right now, it is deadly serious, not least for business. The latest company to express concerns that a no deal will be ruinous for business is Ford, which employs 13,000 people in Britain. It was reported today that on a private call with Theresa May, Ford said no deal would be catastrophic and could result in moving some production from the UK. But tomorrow, the prospect of a no deal will loom large at Westminster yet again. The Prime Minister faces the possibility of another defeat at the hands of her own MPs, with the Eurosceptic ERG group threatening not to back her motion. I'm joined by our political editor, Nick Watt, and our economics editor, Ben Chu. Nick, yet another new threat to Theresa May tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow was looking like quite a sedate affair. Theresa May would cruise through those votes because the general view was she's talking to Brussels again, give her some time. But as you say, the Brexiteer Tories not happy with the government motion and are threatening to vote against it. And the reason for that, as this motion basically accepts the two last votes. One of those was to look at replacing the Northern Ireland backstop. That's fine, they voted for that. But the other one would accept the other vote that went through, which puts no deal off the table. And the Brexiteers say that that is a very unwise idea. They've had a series of meetings with the Chief Whip, and they say you need to get rid of that wording or at least water it down. And the message has come back no. And they think what's happened is that the government has reached a deal with pro-Europeans who have agreed to hold back putting forward an amendment to extend Article 50, and they think the deal is the government does this wording tomorrow and they'll hold fire.
So, what would, though, a defeat for Theresa May, or it's just water off a duck's back now? I mean, the thing is that it's just the level of the defeat, the manner of the defeat. You know, not one defeat is the same as the next.
Yeah, I mean, technically, it wouldn't mean a great deal. It's not a piece of legislation, but it would undermine her authority in Brussels because, of course, she went back there and said, let's have a talk again, because finally she was able to command the confidence of the House of Commons, and that wouldn't help because there is sort of growing impatience in Brussels. Donald Tusk, the European Council President, today, he said no concrete proposals from the UK. And Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, who's friendly towards the UK, says the UK seems to be doing nothing to stop no deal. He talks about sort of heading over the cliffs of Dover. And there really is a feeling in Brussels that the UK is running down the clock until March. Important to say that the Prime Minister might get away with it tomorrow because the European Research Group have not decided whether to vote against her or to abstain.
Right, let's turn to business now, because, you know, we've just heard today that there was this meeting on the telephone, I should say, a telephone meeting with Theresa May and Ford executives where they said, look, this is going to be catastrophic. You know, how genuinely bad is it for business? It, obviously, for some sectors more than others.
Well, Kirsty, I've been talking to businesses both large and small today, and that's very much the same message that I've been hearing. The overwhelming feedback is that a no-deal Brexit would be extremely damaging for all these firms, and politicians are still not taking it sufficiently seriously. And even some pro-Brexit businessmen are starting to feel like that. I was talking to Simon Wolfson, the chief executive of Next, supporter of Leave, and he said there needs to be a message from the government on tariffs. He told me it's desperately important for government to issue provisional tariff rates that would apply in a no-deal Brexit. Lower worldwide tariffs would eliminate consumer price fears and allow businesses to plan effectively. So even pro-Leave business people are starting to get a bit concerned about the way things are going.
Well, it's interesting because, of course, we heard that, you know, what it was, 145,000 businesses have been contacted by the civil servants to reassure them. But what reassurance can be offered? We have no idea what the actual vote's going to be in that one day after the next.
Well, it's very difficult. And you know, this is really feeding through to the real economy now. We saw business investment figures earlier this week that confirmed that for every single quarter of last year, business investment fell. And all the forward-looking surveys are showing an equally dire prospect for 2019 while this uncertainty continues.
But is there a frustration that they don't think they've been listened to?
There is, and you know, there are. I mean, to be fair, there are some firms, some smaller firms mainly, who say this is overblown. It's the bigger firms who haven't planned correctly, and we have. But it's important to stress they're very much a minority. As I said before, the overwhelming majority of firms I've been speaking to, which the business lobbies represent, are saying that no deal is a very, very big problem, and urging politicians to take it much more seriously than they are.
Thank you both very much indeed.